no one has to tell you what to do. It's already in you. You just got to find a way, and you finding a way is the art. Like, I think that's the big message. You have more in you than you realize. You just need the right kind of, you know. And so you might think, oh, I'm not a very creative person. It's like, no, you're creative. I promise you. When you
Yeah.
get put into a corner and you have no way out, and it's do or die, and if you decidedly do not want to die, guess what? You're going to get pretty fucking creative. I'll guarantee you. This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte,
exploring the challenges of the creative call
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art.
All right, welcome to the show. It is a podcast with Brandon and Evan talking about some stuff. Just trying to make Evan laugh. That's all I try and do at the beginning. How's it going, Evan?
Well, it's like, it's like I find that your intros, like, it's like these sort of like these slow wading into the pool on this one. Like, hey, buddy, we're it's a podcast, and it's definitely not coming in gangbusters, but
no.
It's coming in. It's coming in somehow.
Yeah, well, it's coming.
It is an intro, Brandon. It is an intro.
It is an intro. So this one that we're doing is I think comforting.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay,
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm up to today, Evan. I don't really know, but you know more than you think you do. That's the title of this one, and I want to just start by saying that there are inclinations, let's say, inclinations of things that you want to do, you're thinking about doing. And if you try to work it all out, if you try to figure it all out, sometimes you're just going to get in your own way. I think a lot of the time, this is why it's so important to just start. And if I can quote kind of the Tony Robbins thing, which, whatever you think of him, it's fine, but he's definitely shared some great wisdoms. I like him. But he talks about decision, and we've talked about this before. And his point was, and I think it's a great point, is that you haven't made a decision until you've actually taken an action. The decision happens once you actually act, once you actually do something. And I agree, because, if you're a decisive person, you almost act as quickly as you decide. And that's why decisive people tend to get stuff done. They tend to be relatively successful. Sometimes they are careless. You can be decisive and you can be careless, but if you're genuinely trying to move things forward, decisive people tend to actually move things forward quicker than people who are indecisive, simply because a decisive person makes a decision, and sometimes they make a mistake, but then when they make a mistake, they quickly make a decision about that mistake, and then they move forward again, and they continually deciding over and over. And they're not just in their head sitting there going, oh yeah, I think I'll do this. They actually do something. And that's what actually makes you decisive. So you could say that a decisive person is more of a fast acting person. And I do think there is room for the debate of, look before you leap, count to 10, these little wisdoms of like, take a moment, think this one out before you jump into it. But I think it's important to consider that, the decision is really only made once the action is taken. And I think why this relates is that sometimes, well, actually all the time, you're never really going to know all the answers. You're never going to have all the information. You're always going to be short somewhere. And there's always going to be something else to learn, something else to figure out, something else to know. So you have to give yourself a little bit of credit, a little bit of faith, if you want to call it that, and just say like, hey, you know what? Maybe I'll just kind of figure it out as I go. And maybe I actually have more of this than I realize. And I think that's what'll allow you to fly by the seat of your pants a little bit and find out what's possible. because you're never really going to know until you're pushed as well. You know, one other thing to say about this before I pass it on to you is that you really won't do the difficult thing until you're put in a position where you have to. Most people will always choose the most comfortable, easy thing. And it's only when we're under pressure that we actually do great things. 99% of the time, let's say. There's probably an exception. So it was like, whoa, this one time I did this. Yeah, okay, great. But like, come on, honestly, 99% of the time, you're going to choose the easy option if you can. And that's smart. It's actually an intelligent thing to do, but it's not always good for you. It's not always a good thing in the long run and in the bigger scheme of things. That's why I always say, like with writing, you should put your character in a corner, force them to make a hard decision. You'll find out who they really are. Because if they can make the easy decision, they probably will. And that's just because that's human nature. We don't try to make life any harder on ourselves than necessary. So decision puts you in action. Action usually eventually catches up with you, and you're going to make the wrong decision. And then you're going to have to deal with the consequences. And that's going to put you into more creative action. So it's almost through error that you find out how great you are, not through your success.
Yeah, it is the sort of like the easiest path. And you know, I think that there is a wisdom to taking the easiest path. I think because if you lived your life where you always, in every scenario, in every situation, always took the most challenging path, like you would live the most inefficient life imaginable, and there'd be a lot of wasted energy. I think that when we want to be very concerned about the things that we're avoiding, or the things where we're avoiding discomfort, is when it's in some area that we have some aspect of ourselves where a passion is concerned, I guess, where there's a place of inspiration, a spark of creativity that you have, that when you're avoiding that because of discomfort, then I think that's when you say, don't take the easy way out on that one. And because there is a price to pay for that. I think when you ignore the creative call, when you ignore the creative spark that's coming from within you, that eats away at you. That does all kinds of damages, and until it hits a point, like you said, where it becomes a pain point, right? So I think that's, you know, in some ways the test, the litmus test of where you might need to push into something a little bit, and it's usually when it's a creative something. One other thing about this conversation that's striking me, because what you're saying about decision and action, and to me, I think that's where, you know, we haven't talked about our laws in a long time, you know, our artist laws, and this episode clearly has a lot to do with our law of beginning. And the thing that I like about our law of beginning is that, to me, it encapsulates that whole decision action sort of togetherness, that decision action dance, because there's the beginning. The law of beginning is both of those things in motion. It's the decision and the action that actually sets the thing into motion, right? And so I think what I would like to do to start off this conversation is I'd like to just share a little bit of the story I was telling you in terms of where the inspiration for this topic came from. So the other weekend I had some friends come and stay for the weekend, some people you know as well. And I was getting into a chat with my friend, and he was telling me about how he thought about going into English out of school, studying English, studying literature. And he thought at the time, well, what am I going to do? Be an English teacher, and that didn't interest him at the time, although now that seemed like it would have been a more interesting thing in his life now. Regardless, he expressed to me this unfulfilled, maybe not unfulfilled, but this part of himself that loves to write, and that he wants to write and bring that back into his life, and yet he hasn't done it. And he was saying, well, I have no idea what I would write about. He's like, I have no idea. And I said, well, what would it be? Would it be scripts? Would it be short stories? Would it be poetry? Would it be, I just started pressing into it. And he's just like, well, I think like a story, like a short story, novel, maybe something along that. I was like, oh, okay. But you don't know what it would be about. And he's like, no. And I was like, okay, well, what do you think you might write about? Like if just like, let's just reframing the question a little bit. And then he's like, well, I think I would actually write something dystopian. I would write like a dystopian fiction. It's like, oh, okay, interesting. And the conversation carried on, and just like with a little bit of digging in. Like, it wasn't even like we were having to bring out any real heavy machinery to get in there. But it turned out, and it really amazed me, that there was actually all of this stuff there that he already knew about. If he were to actually put pen to paper, or put his finger on the keyboards, that there's actually a lot there that he knows that he would write about, and probably even more than we even had discussed. And that was just such an interesting thing to me, in that how much I think that that's actually the case when it comes to creativity, especially when we've been sitting on an impulse for a long time. Because I think that all of those impulses, they don't go away. They just stay, and in some ways they build and they stew and they grow. When you're in the shower, when you're out for a walk, like these little things in the subconscious and in the creative spark, they keep filling up and filling up and filling up and filling up, until you realize that when you just put a little bit of attention on it, right? When you finally give that creative call some attention, you start listening to it and spending some time with it, all of this stuff that's been just pooling up just starts flowing out and flowing out and flowing out. And all it takes is that little bit of effort and energy, just a very little bit, to just give it some attention. And then, as you were saying, and then with the beginning, with the actual beginning of it, and in many ways you could say that is the beginning of it, because you've decided to give that thing some attention, which is an action, right? One of the most powerful actions that we have as human beings. So yeah, that was sort of, for me, my interest in going into this conversation of sometimes we know more than we think we do. And I think that answer, I don't want to use the word lazy, but that I don't know. I don't know what I would even do. I don't know. There's a part of me where I just go, I don't really buy that. I don't really buy that you don't know anything about this thing that you feel a call to do. I think that you actually know quite a bit about it, because anything that has that kind of meaning to you, because I think that any creative spark has inbuilt in it deep meaning to you, because it has to, because creativity is a thing that kind of exists for itself, right? Like there's no promises or guarantees of anything from creativity, but when you have the impulse to do it, it has such a deep meaning inbuilt that you that you have to have something that's going on there, that just continues to, I don't know, just continues to build itself out.
I'm glad you shared the story because I think it does give a lot of context to what we're talking about here. And when I hear that story, I think of prompt, the power of the prompt. And I just think like most people struggle because they don't ask the right questions. The mind has everything. Like your life experience has most everything you need already kind of, it's like already saturated with it, right? Like so the question is such an important thing and the words you use are powerful. Like, there's a saying, they call it spelling because you're casting a spell, and so whenever people say words, I have these rules for myself. When I listen to people talk or when I speak myself, I try to, well, there, I just used one. I don't know if you caught it. Try. That's a warning word for me. It's a red flag word. Let's put it that way. It's like, are we going to try or are we going to do it? Or are we going to not do it? Like, what's this try business? You know what I mean? It's like, why did I just say try? And there's a good question. It's like, well, I didn't really want to commit to like saying that I'm perfect at it. Okay, I'm not perfect at it. Okay, we establish that. Great. You're not perfect at it. Okay, can you accept that? Yeah, I can. This is a question, right? Can you accept that about yourself? Yeah, okay. Now, are you going to do it or you're not going to do it? I want to do it. Okay, you're going to do it? Okay, let's do it. You know what I mean? And so like your questions and your statements and the words you use, you got to be on the ball about it. It's about sharpness. To me, like particularly about writing, but I would imagine that it's the exact same for every medium. Your sharpness, you want that like a razor's edge. And the more you get into a razor's edge, the better you're going to be able to cut through the bullshit that really is your own bullshit, right? So when you say like it's never a question for me, am I going to write today? That is not even a question. Every day I write, no matter what. And I've done for over 10 years every single day, and I'll keep writing until I decide not to write. The question of whether I'll write or not is not up for debate. What I will write is very much up for debate. So when I sit down currently every morning and I'm about to write, I ask myself, what do you want to talk about? Like if you were gonna note anything down about what's going on, what's noteworthy? What's something that's on your mind? What are you feeling? What, like, start there. And that's how I begin. And then through that emotion or through that direction, I tend to find something else to talk about, something to write about, something to explore. And so if you ask the question and you don't undermine yourself in the process by saying things like try, or here's another warning one I have, I'm just going to do this. No, it's not just, this is exactly what's going on right now. Yeah. I'm just drinking my coffee. No, you're drinking your coffee. And that matters as much as anything else at this moment. That is what you're doing. There's no, don't undermine it. Don't undervalue it. You know what? If the character is drinking their coffee, that's what they're doing. That's what matters. That's what's happening. And there's lots of things like that where you look at words and you go like, what does this word do for me? Or what does it take from me? And another warning red flag word I'll come up with just to mention is can't. I can't. It says, hold on. No, you won't. The word is won't. Let's be honest here. You won't do it, or you will do it. And then when you go, well, if it's a will or won't, are you doing it or not? That's the question now. No, I'm not doing it. Okay, you're not doing it. So don't complain when you don't get what you want because you're not doing it. You know what I mean? Like, and these types of things create precision and sharpness. And so like obviously I'm a writer, so the word is obviously an important tool that I have to use. But I share that with everybody in every medium because we do tend to think in terms of words, even if we're visual, even if we're auditorial thinkers, because that's a part of it. We still use words as a spell on our minds, right? So you're when you're talking to your friend there, you gave him wonderful prompts that opened up doors that he just wasn't opening because he didn't have the prompt. So I think like so much of what we're talking about today is about the prompt, the power of the prompt, right?
Yeah.
That's how you get to the knowledge you already have. You don't realize you have. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've referenced Krishnamurti once or twice, and he made a comment, something to the effect of the right question has already begun to answer itself, or something like that. You know, it's like the right question has already brought you most of the way to the answer. And
it's sowing
so
the seeds.
Yeah,
it sows the seeds.
And
it plants the seeds and sows them at the same time if you do it right.
Yeah. And I think, you know, in terms of when I asked my friend this question, and this is something that I learned some time back. But it's in a way, it's like taking the pressure off of the thing, right? Where it's like, well, what is it going to be about? Oh, geez, I don't know. It's like, oh, okay, but you don't know. Okay, you don't know. But what do you think you might write about if you were to do something like that? Totally, it's like, oh, well, you know, okay, well, I guess if, you know, you take the pressure off of the thing, and then the thing actually just like, oh, yeah, this is what it would be. And I think that that's a big part of the problem. And in some of what you were saying, and it's really interesting to me, that this whole try-do thing, you know, the famous words of Yoda, right? There is no try, there is only do. And
or do not,
just from what you were saying, it's actually helped me to reframe some of why that's a problematic thing to me, because there's, on some aspect to me, I've always thought and felt, well, look, life is all about trying to do things. You know, like it's and so what's so wrong with that? But there's a part of me that was still recognizing, like, oh, but there is something about that kind of wisdom. And what's occurring to me in this moment is that just because you say you will do something, or just because you say that you are going to do something, doesn't automatically mean you're going to succeed at it, right? You can still fail. You know, you can still have numerous fails in the doing of something, in the pursuit of doing something. Where I think that, as you're saying, like, because language is such a powerful thing for us to use for and against ourselves. And what's occurring to me is that when we eliminate this word of try in this particular context, right, when we're about to endeavor into something that is meaningful to us, when you say, like, okay, well, I'm going to try, right? There's this half in, half out mentality with that.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas when you say that, okay, I'm going to do this, you're still trying. Mm-hmm. Like, the trying is built into the doing, right? But when you say that you're going to do something, for me, what that says to me is that you are allowing yourself to commit more fully to what you're doing. And when it comes to creativity, commitment is really everything. Like, and so the more that you can use the language, and this is what I'm understanding just now in this conversation about this try-do problem, is that the do is language that actually allows us to commit. It doesn't mean that success is inbuilt with that, but it's giving us a better chance at it because we're allowing ourselves to invest more fully by saying, okay, I'm doing this, right? There's something more powerful within that. It's like we're calling on a more powerful aspect of ourselves to show up and get involved and engaged. And, you know, it's interesting one last thing I'll put into this with language and the power of the language that we use. Brandon, do you remember the actor's thesaurus?
Yeah, I do. I do remember that one. Yeah,
I still have a copy of that.
me too.
Because and I'll probably hang on to it forever. It's a useful little tool. Just for people out there who maybe have not spent time in the acting world or don't know much about it, language is an essential part of how actors learn to work with themselves, how actors learn how to tap into themselves, into their emotions, into all kinds of, their inner life, where an actor can really spend time just thinking about a word in terms of how do you feel about this person that you're talking to? What is it that you are trying to do, achieve, get across in this scene to this other person? And using different words can completely shift the life of an actor in a scene, right? And it's like, I'm just trying to think of something off of the top of my head. Like maybe instead of an actor saying, okay, in this scene, I'm going to force the information out of them. Maybe that's like what an actor's decided they're trying to do to this character in this scene. I was like, I've got to force the truth out of them. Okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But for the actor who's doing it, it's like, well, maybe force isn't a word that actually really makes them come alive, right? Maybe it's a word like I'm gonna pound this out of them. I'm going to, and even if it doesn't mean they're physically going to be doing that in the scene, right? Like, but there's a different word that you use, and suddenly, like, you just see actors, in my own experience as well. Like, it's a continued part of my own process where it's like, okay, yeah, these words help me to come alive, in a way that I can't necessarily rationalize why it does that, but it does. And so I'm not going to question it. Right. So this is all to say that, yeah, the how we talk to ourselves, the words that we use, the questions that we ask are maybe so much more important than we realize.
Yeah. Who is it? Newman? Who's that very famous actor?
Paul Newman?
Paul Newman, that's it. Sorry, I was blanking on his first name. I was like, what is it?
Doesn't he make salad dressings?
He said the best direction. I think he was the one who said the best direction he ever got was the director saying, I want you to crowd him. Because that's such a doable thing. Crowd him. Yeah. Like, what do you imagine when you think of crowding someone? What does that look like to you? And every actor might have a little bit of a different take on that. But like, when I think of it, I mean, I'm thinking like, oh, I want to make it space tight. I want to make him feel like I'm over him. I want to make him feel like I'm in his fucking face. You know what I mean? So now all of a sudden you got this actor that's like in their face, right? And it's like, that's such a doable thing. And so now you got something to do, which is such a helpful thing as an actor. But you know what? I would take that even further. That's great as a writer. Like when you're writing a scene, you're like, yeah, I want this guy to pound it out of him. I want him to crowd him. I want him to, get that. And so now all of a sudden, even when I think of that, like I think of a scene, what would be a scene where someone was crowding someone? I imagine like, a bookie trying to get money out of somebody and saying, hey man, you fucking owe the money. But like, you know what I mean? And like, how would that look? And all of a sudden I'm starting to have something come alive in me already. Right. And I don't even know who the characters are. I don't even know the situation yet, but all of a sudden something's breathing. It's like happening. Right. So and words are powerful. It's a great example.
And again, for different people, like maybe in that same thing, one actor is like, no, I'm going to pound it out of him. I'm going to just, like rip it out of them, you know. And there might be an actor who has that choice, but then there's another actor who's coming, who's like, no, it's like, no, I'm gonna coax it out of them,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
or I'm gonna hypnotize this thing out of them, and it's
Yeah,
going to
yeah,
create
yeah,
an
yeah.
entire new set of behavior from that actor, which might still be completely appropriate for the scene, for the thing. That's a whole very specific thing about acting, but it's just I think anyone listening to it, because even what you were saying about the Paul Newman story was like, I want you to crowd him, and I just went, yeah, I was like, oh yeah, just like all over, like I'm just like gonna take away the space, and you know, it creates there's a whole energy that's tied up in our language, and motivates us and moves us in very, very powerful ways.
You know, we when we were auditioning parts for this one character in the show I was doing, there was an actress that came in. You can look her up. She's done very well. Her name's Emily Bett Rickards, and she came in, and she got the character. We had so many women audition for this part, and like in the town, like every woman seemed to want that part. It was just like, and it was a great part, but it was kind of unique. You know what I mean? Like it was like written kind of like it was kind of a female character, but she was written like one of the guys. And I mean, maybe that sounds like an obvious thing, but in the context of the story and just the way the character worked, it was just the right dynamic at the right time in the right way. But all these women came in, and so many women did a great part. Like we had a lot of contenders. We were like, when we had all the headshots and we were trying to figure out who do we cast for this role, man. But she came in and she got the role in a way that nobody else really understood. And it was like, this is the thing, is like, when you look into like how you're going to do something, you know, you can use this technique. I mean, I guess maybe I don't want to get too far off topic, but like you can look at something, and the problem with this particular character, as great as it was written, I often find this happens. Great characters have a great trap. So there's like almost an obvious way to play the character. And what ends up happening is a lot of actors come in and they tend to play the character in that almost obvious way. And where I found, because we auditioned, like, I mean, I must have seen like over, like not for that role, but like overall, I've probably seen over 1,000 actors audition, at least at the minimum. And I've seen a lot of actors come in and do different takes on things. And what I did find with the actors that really made the most impact is they tended to look at it in a sense of like, what could I do that would be like a true approach in this scene? Because like, for example, people might say you're an actor and you're not a big guy, right? You're kind of a smaller guy, but you for whatever reason got sent out for this part, and you look in the audition room, everyone around you is like this big brawler kind of guy, and you're like, man, like I'm not going to intimidate like these guys intimidate. So that's when you could fucking win the role, because you could come in and you could seduce it out of the person. You could hypnotize it out of the person. You could caress it out of the person. Whereas everybody comes in, they're like, yeah, like give me the fuck money, you know, like, and they just kind of breathe down the guy's neck. But you come in and you're like, come on, man, give me the money. You know what I mean? Like, you come in this soft way, but like there's a sense of danger behind you, you know, because like you could hurt them, but you're coming in real soft. That's even scarier, because it's like, what if this guy fucking lets loose on us? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just kind of pointing out to how creativity, sometimes you have more of it than you realize. You have access to something that isn't so obvious, but you gotta like trust that you could try. Like, and I say try, but like do it. Go for it.
Yeah.
Take your path, you know? It might be the best path there is available.
Yeah, I was just what you were saying, I was thinking about Joe Pesci in Goodfellas.
Sure. Great example.
You know, like, he's tiny. He's a tiny dude. And his character in Goodfellas is one of the most frightening. He's one of the most frightening film characters for me, I think, in history. Like he's right up there in how scary he is in that movie, because you just don't know what he's going to do. You see, like, he might just fly off the handle. And so, like, it's related, but on a somewhat separate thing, my uncle was he's retired now, but he was a career city police officer. And he also, like, my cousins and stuff, as they were getting older and like going out to like bars and clubs and things like that. And he would tell them, he's like, you don't have to be as afraid as the big guys, because the big guys are showing you what they're coming with. He's like, it's the little guys to be afraid of. He's like, the little guys are the ones who are like, they're carrying a knife, they're carrying something with them. And it was just his experience as a police officer. He was just like, that's what you have to worry about. So it's like, you know, it's not just some sort of an actor's decision and how to do something interesting. There's a real reality to it. There's a very real, yeah, there's a very real scare and threat to the smaller person over just the big guy. I mean, you got to be worried about the big guy too, but
no, but I mean, here's what I want to take away from that. What you're sharing is that you don't count yourself out just because you don't look like the obvious choice, just because you don't have it front of mind yet. Don't count yourself out. I think, like, if we're coming back to the point of the conversation, you know more than you think you do. Like, you might be better built for this thing than anybody else. And so don't count yourself out. Like look at it in terms of, I mean, there's a saying in theater, and we're talking about acting, so let's just, you know, let's work with it. But it's like, the show must go on, you know, is a saying. The show must go on. We got to put it up tonight. Like, we got to figure it out. What are we going to do? And so, you know, all of a sudden you can find yourself in these situations in life where you're put in a situation and you feel like, man, I'm not the right fit, but I'm here and I'm the guy or I'm the gal who has to do it or whatever. And it's like, well, what are you going to do? And you know what? You might realize that sometimes being forced into a situation that doesn't quite feel right, that feels a little bit uncomfortable, is actually what's going to bring the best out of you. It's going to force you to do something. It's like, well, you know, this guy's 6'4" and I'm 5'7". How am I supposed to intimidate a 6'4" guy? You know, I'm just making something up. But you're 5'7" and that guy's 6'4", and you're looking at it and going, like, how is a 5'7" guy going to intimidate a 6'4" guy? But wouldn't it be fucking interesting if they did? Mm-hmm. Now that's where a movie and a play exists, man. That's interesting. A 6'4" guy intimidating a 5'7" guy. Yeah, I mean, that's standard. That's usual. It's not a lot of art in that. That's pretty obvious. Yeah. But art exists in those realms where you sometimes think, hey man, like I don't, and that's the thing about art. Art surprises you. It comes up in ways where you least expect, I find, you know?
Yeah. I was just thinking of, how would I direct somebody who is maybe like a smaller guy who's not used to playing an intimidating figure or something, and I was directing a scene where I needed more of that intimidation in a scene where it's like, yeah, there's this 6'5" guy, and it's like, this guy needs to be actually kind of scared of you.
He grew an inch between when we talked.
Yeah.
So he's 6'5". Yeah.
Yeah, 6'5". And what I just thought was, you know, even if it's not actually literally true of the scene or something, would be like, I want you to act as if you've got a 9mm in your back, in like tucked behind your back, and you have no qualms about pulling it out and using it. That's how I want you to talk to this guy right now. You know, like that's what I want you to have. Like, where it's like, oh, okay. At least, because for me, I'm thinking, you know, what would get me into that place? Because I'm not a huge guy or anything like that, or someone that most people would consider to be intimidating by any stretch. But it's like, I'm just thinking for myself, how would I get myself into that place if that was what was needed of me, right? Mm-hmm. And even if it's not actually true of the scene, that's just like, you don't actually have a gun on you or whatever it is. It's like, no, but I'm going to play it that way. I'm going to act it out as if, and nobody will know. Like that's that's one of the beautiful things about acting, is that like how you get to a certain place, the audience never knows, right?
I'll share some with you, Evan. So Ted Whittle, who we were fortunate enough to have an episode with him, which you guys should all listen to, which I think is a great one. Something worth digging into. But he was an acting teacher of ours, and he got us to do these exercises, and we had to bring in a scene. And I think this was before you were in class. But we talk about it a bit on the podcast episode. But we had to take this, it was kind of like this random bit of dialogue, and we had to come in with a vocal and a physical impediment into this scene to do it. And for whatever reason, I came up with a story of how I was like this bookie who was coming in to collect money. And the guy was kind of a childhood friend, was kind of the backstory and whatever. And I made some stuff up. But like my physical impediment was that I had like a pretty severe health issue, like internally, and I was covering it up. And I'm coming in there to kind of like get the money and intimidate him. But like if we got into a physical alteration, my guy would have got destroyed. Like he just physically was not in a position to be able to dominate anybody, even though I was physically bigger than the guy and whatever. And that is interesting as well, because like you come in and now you got a character that has to pretend not me as an actor, but the character is pretending that they're as tough as they are when they're really in a weak, vulnerable position, and they're here to collect money because that's their job, and they're also in a, you know what I mean? And that creates a very interesting scene now, because you're playing a game of poker with this person. You're not showing all your cards, and so in some ways, as much as you might be kind of intimidating them and saying, hey, there's a sense that I'm going to kick your ass if you don't do what you need to do, knowing that you couldn't if it came down to that creates an interesting dynamic now with the situation, because now it's like, yeah, like I have to pretend like I would, but I'm not, like if we go there, like he's going to hurt me and I might not be able to survive it, And so, I think the thing is with art is a lot of the time, you don't necessarily know what you're going to do, but you got to like entertain ideas. You got to be willing to try stuff. And, I think like, with what we're talking about, just to kind of like keep bringing it back to the main topic. It's not that you need to be some trained writer or actor to necessarily do this. Sometimes you just need to be directed or encouraged in the right direction to pull the things that are out of you, because like that's where I think directors can really flourish, or writers can really flourish with like performers, is when they can understand how to prompt the actor into bringing something out of themselves they didn't know existed. Like that's the thing that excites me the most about working with like actors, is because they might not be able to see it, but if I could give them the right combination and just say, hey, like here's what's going on, they will intrinsically already have brilliance come out of them, because they'll be forced into a situation. Okay, what do I do? I'm the bigger person, but I'm not healthy. This is the situation. Or I'm the smaller person and I can't physically dominate that person. What do I do? And you working that out in your mind, like no one has to tell you what to do. It's already in you. You just got to find a way, and you finding a way is the art. Like, I think that's the big message, you have more in you than you realize. You just need the right kind of, and so you might think, oh, I'm not a very creative person. It's like, no, you're creative. I promise you, when you get put into a corner and you have no way out and it's do or die, and if you decidedly do not want to die, guess what? you're going to get pretty fucking creative. I'll guarantee you, you know?
Yeah. Hey, everybody, this is Evan, and this episode is brought to you by my book. Yes, I recently released a book called The Actor's Awakening, Connecting Spirituality to Craft. Expand yourself as an actor and your craft through a spiritual perspective. Take a journey that will explore universal philosophies and insights to help you understand human nature in a profound way and develop practices to take your work to another level. Again, that's The Actor's Awakening, Connecting Spirituality to Craft, available on Kindle and paperback on Amazon. And as always, if you like the show, please subscribe. Yeah, I think that that's a thing that we forget, and is maybe one of the most valuable lessons that we can ever learn about ourselves, is that, and what's so incredible about human beings, is how strong we are and how adaptable we are, how we can be thrown into a situation, we can figure it out. I think that we don't trust ourselves enough to do that. And I think that the most, I guess, creatively strong, thriving types of people are very often just the people who have learned to trust themselves, to just like, I'm going to put myself into this situation and I'm going to see what happens. Right? Like at the beginning of this conversation, you were talking about this whole thing of like, looking before you leap. Right. And yeah, there's definitely a necessity to giving yourself a good footing before you set out, because otherwise there's a good chance that you're going to stumble before you even, you're not going to give yourself a chance. But there's a thing about that we also say about taking too long, right? Like shit or get off the pot, right? Just like it's
he who hesitates is lost.
Yeah. Like, so there's, we have these two sort of wisdoms that exist together. It's just like, look, make sure you're prepared, prepare, because you got to prepare, but don't take too long in preparing. Right. Like there's, and they go together. They actually don't contradict. They don't contradict each other. They both work together, where it's like, you got the planner, and then you got and then the one who's like, all right, let's just get in there, because the planner can't figure out everything and doesn't know everything that's going to happen. And so there's this thing that's like, okay, pack your bag and let's go. Right. And you'll figure it out. And if you've equipped yourself with the right things, you can adapt and adjust as you need to, and figure out the stuff that you maybe forgot or left out, or whatever it is, the things that you couldn't have possibly known were going to be needed for the journey that you had out in front of you. But you've got to put yourself out there, right? And just see what comes out of you, because that's, I think, one of the most exciting things about the creative process. And I think why a lot of people do it is because you discover things about yourself, like and you're surprised by things that come out of you that you didn't know were there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think that's a massive part of why people get into the arts. It's because there's something outside of themselves. There's something outside of that space of control that we're always trying to live in all the time, where it's like, let's get a little out of control, because it's only in that place where I'm out of control that I actually start to really learn something about myself, or actually really begin to discover something about myself and what I'm actually capable of.
Yeah. So a couple of things are coming up for me as we're working this one out. One is, your sometimes your beliefs about yourself as so it's possible is just a lack of encouragement. You never got encouraged, and or you got discouraged at exactly the worst time, and so then at some point you decided, I'm not a creative person, or something like that, or this isn't for me, right? Or this happens. I was talking with someone about this the other day. We were talking about math and how, like, some people say, oh, I'm not good at math. Well, is it that you're not good at math, or is it that you never got encouraged with math? Or is it that you did something wrong in math and got discouraged, and then it never got, you never, and you took that on personally? I mean, maybe you're good at math and you don't know. Like, that was something for me that I figured out. Like, I'm actually pretty good at math, but for a long time, I believed I wasn't. I, I actually thought, oh, this isn't for me. I don't like it. Um, and also for me, I didn't realize why understanding math could be valuable. I didn't get why I would care. And then one time at some point, I don't know when it exactly happened, but I just remember being like, oh, math is problem solving. It helps me solve problems. I like solving problems. And I was like, wait a minute, this is just solving a problem. And then I was like, it's deductive, and I like deduction. So then I started to realize, wait a minute, I'm good at deduction. So I'm kind of good at math, aren't I? Because I'm good at deduction and I like deduction. So then boom, all of a sudden I'm like, wow, shit, you're actually pretty good at math. But it was like, it took me a bit to like work it out. So like when we're talking about creativity, like creative pursuits, you might think, I don't have an idea. Is it that you don't have an idea, or is it that you've never been encouraged to explore your ideas? That's a good question to ask yourself. Like, because, and look, not all, one thing I think about creative people, here's what I've noticed about creative people for those who think they're not. Creative people come up with a lot of bad ideas.
Yeah.
To get to a good idea.
Yeah.
They just learned
not
that
efficient.
they just learned that their bad ideas aren't detrimental. They aren't a bad thing. Like you and I, when we used to write screenplays together, we had a rule, which was like, any idea goes, just throw it out there, and it's stupid, and we used to be like this, and I think we still do it even with the podcast. We're like, okay, this might be a bad one, but here's what I'm thinking, here's my kind of direction, and we kind of just throw it out there, and we're like, okay, you know what, I see like a nugget of that kind of makes sense for me, okay, but the title might be stupid, or the idea isn't, but creativity is like that. You're not gonna, when you initially come up with the idea, it's not going to be fully baked. We like to use that term, right? It's not going to be fully worked out. It's kind of in that doughy kind of like mixed stage, It's like, well, what if we tried throwing some chocolate chips into these cookies? Like, would that be horrible? It's like, someone at some point threw them in and was like, I like chocolate. Let's throw it in. Someone was probably at some point like, let's throw some raisins in there. What if we threw in a little bit of, this, right? Like, all of a sudden you're trying things and you're trying to see like, hey, does this work or not? So from a creative point of view, maybe you have the assumption that people who are creative already know what they're doing. And I assure you that most of the time they don't.
Yeah.
They just are willing to try, and then they discover that they did have something that worked, but it wasn't until they tried it. So, if you're thinking like, I think part of this talk is you already are closer than you realize, you already know more than you think. It's like, yeah, like it's just, you got to learn to trust that the trial and error experimental stage of creativity is an important part of the process. It doesn't mean you're not creative. It just means that you're not giving it a chance.
Yeah.
You're thinking.
Yeah, it's just,
well, maybe you can carry that thought on. Yeah.
Well, I was just very entertained and interested by a lot of things you're saying, because you were talking about trying things, after.
Well, yeah, I mean, because
early on,
like you said earlier, though, trying is already assumed in the doing, because I'm not trying, I am doing, but trying is assumed in the doing.
Yeah,
and I liked how you reframed that earlier, because that's a great way to put it.
Yeah,
you don't need to.
Yeah, and I feel like it's just sort of sunk in on a little bit deeper even for me, because it's almost like the order of that matters, right? It's like, don't try to do something, right? It's just like, do the thing, and you're going to be you're going to try stuff in the doing of it, right?
Yes. Yes. But it's a great reframe.
But it's the order of it, which bizarrely makes a huge difference.
But most of the time we do it the opposite. We go, I'll try, but we don't do it. You don't get to try until you do. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
It's so weird. It's such a weird little. It's like why is that? I don't know why that is that way. But it just seems to be that way, where it's like they still go together. You know, the trying and the doing are like what was the other thing I was just saying that go together? Doesn't matter. But the try and the do, they go together. But the order in which you're working with them is significant, right? The do has to come first. You decide to do, and then the trying comes along for the ride. But the I think that there's more creativity in the trying when you've started from a place of doing. I'm just talking in circles now.
You're talking in circles, and if someone
got to stop myself.
In right now, they'd be like, "What the hell is going on?" Well, I would just say, like, the word "try" to me is always a warning, and here's why it's a warning: because it's like when someone says maybe. Like in life, if you don't want to be disappointed, when someone says maybe, count it as a no.
Yeah.
Right? That's kind of the rule. Like if someone says maybe, then just say you're too scared. Like when I hear someone say maybe, what I hear is you're too scared to make a commitment and you're probably a no and you're too scared to tell me directly that you're a no. That's probably what you're saying. So when you say maybe, I'm looking at it going, okay, currently you're a no. So what's like, because at the end of the day, like what's going to get you to the yes? When it comes to like doing or not doing, if you try, I'm assuming you're not doing it. So that's why I think the way you reframed it is such a great way to put it, is because if you're doing it, try all you want. Because the issue with try is that the doing never gets done. That's the issue with the word. And when you say just, let's use that word again. Let's explore that word for just a second. If you do everything you can, and then you call it, well, I just did this, is it in the context of like what? Like, look, I'm just a person in the billions apparently that are in the world. You know what I mean? But I'm a person. What's the necessity of the just? You know what I mean? Like, why do I need to do that? Like the thing about the word try, like here's another word, Evan. Let's just throw this into the mix while we're fucking around. I had a big talk with one of my friends about this, was like, I hope. And we were talking about it. I'm like, I don't really love the word hope, but I do. I like it in certain ways, but in some ways I don't. And she was like, well, why? I like the word hope. I like the word hope. And I'm like, I like it too, but what are we saying when we say we hope? What are we saying? And so something dawned on me, is like, well, are we saying that we hope, is this out of our power? Is this out of our control? Are we saying that it's now out of our hands and now let's just hope for the best? We've done everything we can and now let's leave it up to fate. Let's leave it up to the ether, right? Okay. Then hope kind of makes sense to me. But if we haven't done everything we can, why are we talking about hope? That was kind of my question. You know what I mean? It's like, no, we haven't done everything we can. Well, maybe we do everything we can and then we start hoping before, like, because hoping shouldn't come before doing everything you can.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like one of those words. It needs to come after. It can't come before, otherwise it undermines the thing.
Yeah, it's like armchair activism, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like you're not actually doing anything. Like you're just sitting there and tweeting some bullshit and just being like, I did my part, and it's like, yeah, you care about the environment. Why don't you pick up the fucking garbage on your street or something? You know, like it's or whatever the hell it is.
There's a comedy bit, Evan. It's called Bronze Digger. I don't know the woman who does it, but she
I love the name.
Talks about. I know it's a play on the whole idea, but I'm pretty sure it's in that. I'm almost certain it was in that comedy skit. So if it's not, I apologize to anybody who goes out and listens to it. Still a good skit. Go ahead and listen to it. But I'm pretty sure she points out at one point that someone on social media goes, "Man, we really need to stop." Like, and it was like, we really need to not do genocide. And that's what they posted. And it's like, obviously, we shouldn't have genocide. Like everybody knows this. Like
Yeah.
you're not special by like this isn't a profound statement. This is not an intelligent thing to put out
Unless
in the
they
world.
said it comedically. If it was
Unless
said
they said it comedic.
if it was comedically, then it's a pretty good joke.
Yeah,
but
no,
if they were saying it in earnest, that's really just like, ugh. Yeah.
It's kind of like yeah. I mean, but the thing is like I think what she was pointing out, and it's been granted, it's been years, like a long time since I listened to this skit, but like, anyway, whatever. Even if I'm talking about the wrong skit, the point is that that's not it. That's not a profound thought. You know what I mean? And I think like part of art too is recognizing when something is an obvious thing. Like that's like it's almost dumb to say something earnest. But if you're genuinely a person who's like, shit, I didn't know genocide existed still. Fuck, like, did you guys know this is happening in the world? And then other people who are aware of it are like, yeah, it's happening. You're like, whoa, shit, I was just ignorant. I didn't even know that existed. That's a different conversation. But when you're acting like you're teaching people some type of wisdom, because that was kind of her joke. Like this person was teaching everyone almost like we shouldn't have, like, it's like everybody knows that, man. Like there's not a profound.
Most of us are on the same page when it comes to, most of us are on the same page when it comes to genocide. Genocide like, bad.
Yeah. So like, I think with art, here's just I don't know even how I got into that topic. Honestly, I'm wildly out of control right now.
All right. Well, then let's rein it back in. My point is that with creativity, there's a lot of stuff you're going to find when you start allowing yourself to be creative that you think are original ideas, and you're going to realize that they're actually quite obvious ideas. And you're going to think, oh, I come up with this great idea. And you're like, it's actually not that original. It's actually been thought of a lot already. And you're going to find if you venture into it a little bit further, you're going to actually find out that a lot of your original ideas are things that are so seemingly unimportant that's what makes them almost so important, because they're the things that people don't notice. They're things that you don't realize they're actually so original because they're almost so skipped over. And in a way, we're like, oh shit, I never noticed that until you pointed it out, because I almost took it for granted. Whereas like these big ideas, we all kind of know the big ideas. I mean, we all kind of talk about them. We all kind of relate to them. But it's those little things. It's those little unique things that are like personal to you, you know? Well, you know, it's almost like coming back to that language thing. When you start using whatever your language is, you know, that is your into whatever your creative medium is, like that's like, as we were talking about with acting, different actors can be using an entirely different set of language that's still completely appropriate. You're dealing with the same subject, right? So maybe you're writing a story about genocide. You know, you're writing a script or a story about a genocide, which is something that's like, okay, yeah, we all understand genocide bad, and that's a part of your story. But what is the language in which you're using to help us understand that thing, that makes us really see it in a deeper way, in whatever you have from your perspective, you know, because that's really so much of what any artist does. And you could argue most of what an artist does is share perspective and their perspective on something, right? And in a way that we can access, understand, in a way that for me, art touches us. It can hit us on an intellectual level, but that's not really where I think art is trying to hit us. Not that it doesn't, as I want to reiterate, not that it doesn't. I think that it can definitely be a part of it, but art is trying to make us feel something mostly. Like art is more of a subjective medium than an intellectual one. I think that artists run into a lot of trouble when they try to become intellectual with what they're doing. When it's like, we want to feel something through your work, right? You can comment on something, but don't try and give me a round table debate on this thing. Like, I want you to hit me in the guts with this. I want you to hit me in the heart. I want you to tighten my throat. I want you to do, or I want you to just fill me with a kind of joy, whatever it is. I want you to hit me on that level, because and I think that that's the importance of art, is that very often the intellectual thing doesn't actually change us. It doesn't actually shift us to grow and to evolve. We can have a lot of understandings in the intellectual space, and it has a lot to offer us and give us and provide us. But in terms of really changing who we are, it's usually an emotional thing. It's something that is on a much deeper level, which is where I think art comes through. And so anyhow, this is all to say that you saying that you don't know this about whatever this thing is that you have, well, you know a lot. Again, you know a lot more than you think you do. You know a lot more than you think you do about whatever it is that you're wanting to speak up about, and whatever the medium is that you want to do that through. You know a lot more about that than you think, and that there is unique and powerful perspectives that you have that could really impact another human being, that could really help people see something in a way that they've never seen something before, that could really change somebody's life. But you don't know that until you do it, and are you going to take that chance? Are you going to take that chance on yourself that you could do something like that? Right? But you won't know until you begin. And you could surprise others, but you could really surprise yourself in that whole process too.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think you really summed it up. And I'm thinking of something. So I do this intro with I'll share this before we wrap it up, because I feel like this might be a good story to share. I've shared it before, kind of in various ways, but it's a very important story to me. It's a very important part of my life. But one of my business coaches was talking about another business, and this woman, she makes like earrings or something like that, and she asked her, well, what's the story? How'd your business come to be? And the person was like, well, I don't really have a story. And she's like, I felt kind of disappointed, because these as beautiful as these earrings were, I wanted to know how they came to be. And whatever this business lady didn't share her story, but there is a story, whether she knows it or not. There is a story, and she just hasn't figured it out yet. But if she shared it, it would be powerful. And I was thinking about myself, and I was thinking, what's my story, and what story do I want to share? There's many stories I could share, but what story do I want to share? And I do this intro where people, when they sign up to make a movie, and I usually have like a live group, and when I was doing this more regularly, a whole group would come in, and then I would do this big presentation, and it would take like, basically half an hour to an hour of talking, answering questions, but giving a presentation. And I was thinking about it. I was like, well, maybe a good way to start the whole presentation, as successful as it is, why am I even doing any of this? Why am I even helping people make movies? Because like it is, I love making movies, but there's so much more to it than that for me. And maybe it's good people know that. And so I thought, maybe I should be asking people when they first sit down in the room with me or they whatever, and just say like, why are you here? Why do you think you're here? You're here to make a movie, right? You think I'm here to teach you how to make a movie and that this is an option to do that. But let me tell you why you're really here. When I was in university, I had a best friend named George. And George and we wanted to be filmmakers. And we used to sit poolside and we'd talk about the day when we made our shows and made our movies and what that would be like and how amazing that would be. And we started making a show together at a certain point. We made, a short film together and we started going through that process. But he had never really made anything. I had made a few things. He hadn't really made anything yet. And he was doing his degree, and so was I. And he was like, I can't wait till the day that I get my degree so I can go into film school. And when I go to film school, I'm finally going to get to make films and whatever. And he was a year or two ahead of me. And he got his degree and he got accepted into film school. He was so excited about it. That summer, as he was between university and then going into film school, I get basically a contact by my friend one night, and they're like, "Do you hear what happened to George?" I was like, "No." He's like, "Oh man, like George is dead. Like George got hit by a car and they got T-boned in an intersection." He explained this to me, and I was shell shocked. I was just like stunned because like it was all of a sudden he's just not there anymore, and I couldn't even really grasp it. Like I was very emotional, and but I couldn't. And for the next while, I don't know if it was weeks or months or what, how long it was. It's all a blur to me, honestly. Because I remember one day, like, and this was, I think, a couple months later, I tried to call him. I actually pulled his name up in my phone and I was like, I'm going to call him to hang out. And I was so in denial that as I looked at his name in my phone, it hit me that he wasn't alive anymore. And this is like months after the event. And I realized we're never going to make movies together. He's never going to make a movie. And I remember I sat down in the cafe and I thought it it could all be gone. If we don't do it now, it might never happen. And so that's why I set out. That's why I was the way I was, Evan. That's the way I was. That's why I was so fucking let's do this today. Like when you and I writing scripts and shit. That's why I was like that. Cause I was like, if we don't do this now, we might never do it. So let's meet tomorrow. Let's do it now. And so when I teach people how to make a movie, I'm not just teaching you how to make a movie. I'm teaching you why it's so important that you do it now.
Mm.
And you apparently want to be here to make a movie, and I'm going to help you do it today. And that's why I structured my school. And that's the story of why this school exists, really. And that's important. You know that because that's where it comes from. And are you really here to learn to make a movie? Yeah. But you're also here to learn about life. You're also here to learn about the importance of what we're doing. And so that's important because the difference between just learning the technical things about how to make a movie and having a coach like me that's going to inspire you to fucking pick up the camera, even though you're scared out of your fucking mind, and do it today. That's the difference. And that matters to some people. It matters enough that they'll go out and they'll do it and they'll win awards and they'll fucking make it happen. And I'm not even in it for the awards. I don't even give a shit about any of that stuff. It's lovely, but like the fact that I inspired someone to do something that they talked about and talked about and talked about but never did, that's George every single time. And it makes me emotional because like that's a kid. I'm older now, but that's a kid that was putting it off, that was trying, That was a maybe. You know what I mean? And so like
Mm-hmm.
these things matter. Like this is the thing is like your life matters so much and it informs so much of what you bring to the table, no matter what you do, that, you know, when I think about this talk as we've wrapped it into this point, I'm like, yeah, you know what, man? It is inside of us. We just don't give it the credit it's due. That's what I'm kind of coming to at the end here. It's like, yeah, you know, man, give it a little bit of credit. Like, that was a very important pinnacle moment in my life, but it has informed everything I've done since, you know, since I was 19, 20 years old or something. I don't even remember how old I was, but I was right around then. And, you know, so like, yeah, like, man, there's so much more in us than we give ourselves credit for. You know, we have access to stuff we don't even realize. And it's more about application. It's like, I have access to this incredible experience in life, horrifying and incredible all at the same time. And it's all about how do I use it? You know, it's all about how do I not even use it? How do I honor it? And I would say with everybody, you know, like start honoring your life,
Mm-hmm.
man, because your life has so much gold in it that you're overlooking. You probably don't even realize it, you know? And it doesn't have to be as dramatic as my story, but there's still really important moments in your life that inform a lot of what you do. And if you just started to like kind of, you know, look at the gold in it, you might realize that you have access to a lot more than you realize. You know, I can make myself emotional at any time. All I have to do is tell that story and
Mm-hmm.
connect to that story. That's it. And I almost broke down just on this podcast, just telling the story again, you know? And so like everybody has access to this shit. They just don't give themselves credit. Like they don't realize that it's the fucking, it is the fucking point. That is the point. That's why when I watch a movie, you know, stories like that, if I see anything in a movie that relates to that story, that's gonna hit on something in my life experience, right? And that's what art does. It connects us from afar. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the thing is like your experience is the human experience. You carry all of what is really true and essential about humanity in you. You know, and that might sound like some woo-woo shit to some of you, but it's actually not. It's really actually not. Yeah. There's culture shocks and different things here and there, and like, but most of that stuff is really so insignificant. You know, like I've never been to India, but I know it's there. I know a little bit about the people and the architecture and the, you know, and that has an effect on me in ways that I don't even understand how that has an effect on me. Just what I do know about it. And I know that that the people there have families and people that they love and people that they care about and people who go to work every single day and they work to find a way or trying to understand what their lives are about. Just like, you know, all of the most important ways, the most important things about being a human. I know everybody. You know, like when you break it down to what's really essential, and so do you. You know, and it's just your way of expressing that thing, which I don't know what that is, right? But your way of expressing that thing could be so meaningful and so important to, you know, not everybody, probably not everybody, but probably to a lot of people. Maybe just one person. You know, but like what if that changes that one person, it changes their life for something for the better. You know, like you've put a positive impact on somebody's life. Like that's just as incredible. So let's talk about beer for a second and let's wrap this one up.
I agree, man. No, I think that was a great point you added in at the end. Well, I'll go first if you don't mind.
Sure.
So I'm having a beer from Lillooet Brewing Company.
Ooh.
This is called. I might have. I don't think I ever had this one before, but you never know. We've had so many. This is called Grizzly Bear Vienna Lager, and I'll give you a quick little write up of their or read of their write up. Let's put it that way. A read of their write up because maybe they will describe it better. We combine certified organic Pilsner and Vienna malts to make this refined European lager. We selected cashmere and BC grown crystal hops to create a noble hop character that would make a grizzly and an Austrian proud, we hope. I thought that was funny. Anyway, it's a good beer. It's very tasty. It's I don't know, it's called a lager, but I guess there's a darkness to these types of lagers. I don't really know, but it's been very tasty and
Hmm.
I've enjoyed it quite thoroughly. So that's what I'm having.
Nice. I'm having one that I'm sure we have had probably on the show, if not multiple times, but it just kind of, I saw it and it stood out to me. I'm having the flagship hazy IPA from Steamworks Brewing
Oh yeah, we've had that for sure.
for sure, and it's delicious. It's a really great
So good.
hazy IPA. And I was just, as you were going through your description, I was like, oh, there's actually, this one doesn't have a necessarily a description, but it actually has pouring instructions, which I did not adhere to. But where it's like you're supposed to pour 2/3 of the beer in a glass, and then you're supposed to swirl the can and then pour the rest, which makes sense because I always know it's like very often when I rinse out like a can, especially like a hazy IPA or something like that, there's all of that sediment, all that hazy, like the whatever it is in there is like ends up poured down the sink. So I'll know that for next time. I've learned something today about pouring beer. So
Yeah. And by the way, those as much as those sounded like ads, we're not advertising. This is just a tradition.
yep,
Beer
none
in
of
each
these people are
podcast. All
giving
right,
us money.
I'll wrap up first. I'm gonna let
All
you
right.
close it, Evan. No, we get no money. Give us money. We'd appreciate it. I'd love to be like, this is an ad. We're getting paid. Um, all right. Well, as we've gone through this one, I think I don't know. I guess there's a part of me that's always just I just want to encourage people because I feel like people, I don't know. I just feel like people get really discouraged and they doubt themselves and they don't realize that they they have so much more to offer than maybe they recognize. And I like it when I see people kind of start to themselves a little bit more in just a way of like, you matter. You're like a part of the team. You're like, here, you have something to offer. And so when I think about this conversation, I think about it, it's kind of like for me, it's a lot about rallying the team together of creatives, who's ever listening, who's ever here, and just being like, yeah, man, like you matter and you matter and you matter. And you all have your own thing why you matter. And I don't know what it is, and maybe you don't know what it is, but I can tell you one thing for sure, it is there. You do matter. And if you trust me or trust us, if you're willing to dig into it, trust yourself maybe, you're going to find that there's something in there that you're not, that you maybe never explored. So to me, a lot of this conversation is really about that. So if you have a creative pursuit or I don't know, whatever it might be, maybe give yourself a little bit more credit than you're giving yourself. Maybe like kind of like go like, you know what? I have some life, I've had some experiences. Um, there's things that matter to me. There's things that have hurt me. There's things I've loved or cared about or whatever they might be. And all that stuff matters. All that stuff informs whatever it is. And I don't know what magic's going to come out of that mixture that is you, but it's there. And maybe you just need an outlet, you know? So if you have an inclination to write, or you have an inclination to act or paint or make music, maybe try to explore that, and then and maybe see if you can maybe at some point start to bring out whatever is inside of you into that medium, you know? And one last thing I'll say, Evan, is just, we did talk about this early on, the prompt. You might not be prompted the right way. So try to get yourself the prompt, try to find the prompt, ask yourself the right questions, or, you know, I don't know how you do it, if you don't have someone around to ask you the questions, but you need to learn how to ask yourself the questions that inspire ideas, not ones that close ideas down. Like I don't know what I'm going to write about. Okay, well, if you were going to write about something, what would you write about? Well, I'd probably write about this. Okay, great. Why would you write about that? Well, I'd write about it because of blah, 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 blah. And you're going to start to find out that there's a lot there if you can just ask the right questions. So try to ask open-ended questions that get you to dig in and search those things, because I think you're going to find out that there's a lot more in you than you realize.
Beautiful.
I'm going to leave it there. I'll pass it on.
Yeah.
You have some thoughts.
I'll just piggyback off of that. Yeah. Like for me, this conversation was really like a call to begin, and that there's good reason to begin, even though you might feel like you just like, no, that you don't know, but it's like, you do. That's I think really the whole point is like, it's like, you do, more about this than you think you do. You know more about this spark than you think you do. The problem is that you're thinking too much about it, right? You're not feeling your way through it. And in terms of, some of what you were saying there about, like how are you prompting yourself? It's like, well, what do you think this thing might be about? Right. And one of the things that I've learned, everybody's different, but for myself, that I've learned to pay more attention to, because there were things that I used to ignore, were just these kind of strange impressions that I would get whenever I was engaging creatively with like my acting or writing or whatever it is. It's just like colors, images, feelings, moods. Like you just start. It's like well, and you start to realize that oh, okay, yeah, I know. I have a sense of like what the feel of this thing is. Okay, great. Well, give that some attention. Dig into it. Feel around it. Write about it. Talk out loud about it. Take a walk with it. Like it's just give it some attention. How many times do I have to say attention is magic? It's an incredible magic trick. Like you just give something attention and suddenly, boom, there's this thing just suddenly has life, and it's just shooting things off left and right. That's really all you got to do. And I think that with this one, we are somewhat assuming on some level that if you're listening to this, that you know at least an inkling. Maybe it's just a small piece. You just know a small piece at the moment. It's like, which is, oh yeah, I would like to write something, or whatever the hell it is. Okay. You have that inkling. You have that one call. Great. That's all you need. You just need to know that thing. You need to give it some love. As you said, you need to honor it. That was such a big word that I think that you brought into it. You need to honor those creative things. We're creative beings. We're here to create. So honor that thing, and give it some thought, and don't worry about you might be filled with doubts. Guess what? Every artist, whether they're like super successful or not, has doubts, has questions. But like the people who succeed, the artists who create, are the ones who just know that that's part of the whole thing. There's like, well, I don't know. There's a lot about this thing that I'm engaging with that I don't know, but I'm going to engage with it, right? And find out. That's not something to be afraid of. That's part of the excitement of doing it, because a huge part of it is the discovery, and that discovery of not only what this thing is that you've just decided to involve yourself with, but the things that you're going to discover about yourself along the way. So begin. You know more than you think. And all you've got to do is make the decision to begin and engage. Thank you for listening in on our conversation today. We hope you found something helpful that you can carry forward with you. Head over to our website, wayoftheartist.com, for more free exclusive material and learn about the show. If you haven't already, please support us by subscribing to the show, sharing it with people you know, and keeping compassionate, creative conversation going.